Imagine getting up every day full of energy as if you were in your 20s again. What would that be like? What would it be worth to you? What is your health worth to you? Think about it. Your health isn't everything, but without it, everything else is nothing. And yet, too many of us are taking it for granted until something goes wrong. And no one wakes up hoping to be diagnosed with a disease or chronic illness. And yet, we've never been taught how to be proactive in our health through our school or public health. As a registered health coach and integrative health practitioner, I believe it's time this information is made available to everyone. Combining new knowledge around your health and the ability to do my functional medicine lab tests in the comfort of your own home will allow you to optimize your health for today and all your tomorrows. Don't wait for your wake-up call. Welcome back to the Don't Wait for Your Wake Up Call podcast. My name is Melissa Deely. I am your host, and today I am bringing to you another amazing guest that I'm super excited to interview here. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure.
So I would love to introduce you to the audience. And Laura's full name is Laura Michelle Powers, and she is an entertainer, celebrity psychic, actress, model, host, singer, writer, and speaker. I don't know when she has any free time in doing all of that. She is the host of the popular film and television podcast Behind the Scenes with Laura Powers and hosts Healing Powers podcast, which focuses on healing and spirituality and has landed her in the top 100 podcasts on Apple Podcasts. She's also the author of 8 books and travels full-time for her clients, including celebrities, millionaires, billionaires, television appearances, media appointments, and just for the love of traveling. So I am super excited to have you here today. I have a big love of travel as well, but even more than that, it's the alignment with the theme of the podcast this month, which is tapping into our intuition, our spirituality, and understanding, the universe. And there is something much bigger than all of us that we can physically see. And that is your area of expertise. And I'm just dipping my toe in. So I would love to invite you to share your story as to how you came to this line of work, which you absolutely came by naturally from childhood.
Yeah, so I, as you mentioned, had these abilities since I was a child, and I grew up thinking that I was maybe crazy actually because I saw and sensed things that other people didn't see. I specifically saw ghosts that looked like solid people to me, so very much like the movie The Sixth Sense, if you've seen that. But I didn't really know what to do about it. I thought I was crazy, and then fast forward many years, I just kept it to myself, and then a family friend described a ghost I had seen but never told anyone about. And that was the point for me, which I realized I wasn't insane because, someone else can't see my hallucination if it's a hallucination. And so I was both comforted, but also a little terrified at the same time because that meant this stuff was real. I didn't really have the tools to learn how to manage it at that time. So I did the only thing that I knew how to do, which was try to block it out. So I did that fairly successfully for many years into my adulthood.
And can I just stop you there and just ask, what age were you at that point where you had that revelation that I'm not crazy, but then the fear starts to kick in?
Yeah, I was in college, so I think I was probably like 20 or 21 when that happened. And I just, the internet was around, but it was a different time. It wasn't developed in the same way that it is now. And so I just basically tried to ignore it and kind of shut it out. And then fast forward, many years, and I was living my life very analytically at that point. And I was working in government and politics, and I was married, and everything kind of came to a head for me during the recession in '08. And my contract position ended, and I couldn't find work, and then my marriage fell apart, and I was physically ill. So a whole bunch of things kind of came to a head at the same time. And I went to a psychic that I knew at that time to try to figure out my life, like my direction, what to do. And without me even saying anything about my own abilities, she saw it. She told me I needed to tap into them. And so I started to take psychic training classes, not to be a professional psychic. That was the furthest thing from my mind at that point, but really just to try to get my life together. and figure things out. And through the process of taking classes, the people in the classes would do readings for each other, and they started to tell me I was really talented at it, and people started to ask me to do it for them. And so it just kind of developed organically. And then as I started to tap in for myself, I realized that I was really being guided in this direction. So I, despite being very analytical and having my master's degree in political science and having previously worked in government and politics, I started doing this as my focus. And here I am now. I also, as I started to tap into my psychic abilities, went back to a lot of my creative roots and started focusing more on that as well. So today I work as a psychic. I teach psychic training classes. I'm an author. I'm a singer. I perform. I do kind of all of those things at various times.
I love all of that. And I also just love the fact that, you have the master's in political science and that very analytical brain, because I come from that background as well and have a commerce degree, et cetera, and feel like I'm always in my conscious mind and not as much in my unconscious mind. And I come from a very intuitive mother. And in a previous episode, I shared that I was afraid of her intuitive abilities as a young child. So I blocked them in myself as well. So it's just really interesting parallels between our own journeys where you're just way, way ahead of me. But for the listeners too, that are thinking, well, I don't have any of these powers, what do you have to say to that person?
Oh my goodness. I think we all have abilities, right? It's just like any other kind of ability, artistic or music ability, where there's a natural range of talent. And then there's also, what we do with it, the training, the practice. And there's some people who have very strong natural abilities where, even without training, it's going to show up. So that was the case for me. I couldn't, deny there was something there. But there's many people who have actually very powerful psychic abilities who simply have never learned about them, never learned to recognize them, never learned to practice them or access them. So my mother, for example, is very, very psychic, but it wasn't until I started to learn more about it and talk about it, and then I started to teach classes, and she started to take some of my classes actually, that we had these realizations of just how psychic she was, but she just had never practiced it. And in my case, I'm so extremely clairvoyant. I really see things. And she is too, but it's more subtle. And so she didn't always put two and two together, that something that was coming was a psychic thing. Whereas for me, it was like, well, I'm either crazy or it's psychic.
Right.
It was like really, really clear that something was going on. So I think that a lot of people fall under that parameter where they are, and they just don't even realize it because, we don't get psychic training as little kids in our society.
Wouldn't it be amazing if we did? Actually, it would,
oh my gosh,
much less confusion. And as you said, that, we may be getting the messages, but not interpreting them the right way, or ignoring them, or et cetera, not paying enough attention. And I think that's very true for many people as well. But how amazing is that your opening up to this allowed your mother also to open up to it and learn and train with you and build her own skills? Because I think of it like a muscle, right? The more you practice it, the stronger your ability becomes.
Absolutely. I mean, that is a dream of mine, that we do have this for little kids. I think it's kind of like learning meditation or learning self-soothing tools. Like, this is a very important for just navigating through yourself in your life. And I encourage people to take psychic training, not necessarily just to become a professional psychic, but literally because it's helpful to learn how to live your life better. And ultimately, regardless of what I do for a profession, I have such a better life than when I started, this path and journey. I was physically ill. I was in a toxic relationship. I was, broke. I didn't have a job. I was lost. so many bad things, right? And in a relatively short amount of time, by using my psychic abilities and intuition, I was able to turn things around quite dramatically. And in fact, if you had told me at that time some of the things that I then went on to do, it would have seemed like this magic story, like almost unbelievable. And I want everyone to know that that sort of transformation is possible for them. And even if you already have a really good life, you can make it better and share more with the world as well.
I love that piece of it, being able to even make it better from where you're at, right? So this isn't just for somebody who's struggling and broke and doesn't have a job and in a toxic relationship. Anybody at whatever stage in your life can tap into these tools. And to your point, I believe that when we do, because we're guided and we're supported, that's where we advance more quickly in whatever it is that we're trying to achieve, as
Absolutely.
opposed to
Yeah.
fighting it, right? And it's something that in my recent training, I've recently done NLP, timeline therapy, hypnotherapy training myself. And as I said, tapping, stepping my toe, getting my big toes wet into this whole realm. But the thing that kept coming up for me is surrender, 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 right? Which I know I have to. And for a self-admitted control freak for my whole life, that's hard to do. But I'm working on that because I know that in surrendering, I'm getting the ultimate in terms of support and guidance on the journey that I'm on.
Yeah, I think we're in a major sort of paradigm shift in the world right now. Shifting out of this very kind of toxic masculine approach,
Mm-hmm.
which is, logic at all costs, which is fight versus, kind of right, like whoever has the strongest power kind of wins. Um, not honoring what we feel, not honoring our intuition. And, we're shifting out of that, but it can be a bumpy ride. So, when we are in that alignment with that kind of toxic male energy, it doesn't go well in the long run. And that's what I experienced, where I was just kind of trying to push through, like hammer through whatever I thought was the way that things should play out. And it just wasn't working out for me. And as soon as I kind of surrendered, released, learned to tune in to receive that guidance, everything just went so much better. And honestly, it's such a nicer system when you do that. And even if you can get results through that kind of tough, forceful way, it's very hard. Like it's very difficult. It requires a lot of exertion and a lot of effort to get the results that you get. And so I feel like we're going through this whole kind of collective shift to honor the feminine, the feminine energy. So literally honoring women. I mean, look at still in the world, we still have many more men in positions of power than we have women. And then also just that energy aspect, which is intuition, receiving, gentleness, allowing, instead of, kind of fight, might, pushing, logic, etc.
And you're absolutely right. Like, how much nicer does all of that sound, right?
Oh, yeah.
And there isn't only one way. We can choose another way. We just have to be aware that it's there for us to choose.
Yeah, aware, and then just constantly reframe things and look at, is there a different way to do this? I was actually at a talk one day, and this was a perfect example. The speaker asked everyone to partner up with a partner and then basically arm wrestle. And each time they kind of won, like, went down on the other person, forced their arm down, that winner would get $1. And so people started, and of course everyone's like battling it out, and some people were much stronger and they would, win quickly or whatever. And then there were some very clever people that were just like, oh, well, we'll just go back and forth quickly. Each side gets $1 each time. I feel like that's what we're learning to do as a society, is be like, oh, we don't have to battle it out for there to be winning on both sides. And that's what the light shows me when I do readings all the time, is this principle of the win-win, that
Yes.
there doesn't have to be a losing side, that we can all collectively be kind of winners, so to speak, together as we rise up. And so it's just a matter of reframing, how we're approaching things.
I love that. And the whole concept of the win-win, and then we all rise up together. And I
Yes.
definitely see that shift in the world, because I too come out of a corporate world, very, male dominated energy beliefs. And honestly, that's where I kind of shut off my intuition for the 24 years that I was in that world, because I knew I had it as a teenager. And then
Yeah.
and then after that, I was absolutely guided into the work that I'm doing today, and, was seeing and hearing the messages that moved me here. But there's still so much more for me to be able to explore. So I'm super excited about the path that I'm on. But I would love to hear you talk about the connection between health, which of course is my realm, where I'm looking for root cause of health issues for people, and intuition, and the importance of both, and then simple steps for improving that.
Yeah, I think that our health and our intuition are monumentally connected, and it's really not addressed very much still by mainstream. And even some alternative practitioners, I think, don't pay attention to this as much as they could. But on a physiological level, there's huge connection. So there's two parts of our body that are, well, actually three parts of the body that are very important for our intuition. One is the brain, and the third eye, which is believed to be housed in the pineal gland in the brain. There's our gut. So people are used to thinking about, what does your gut say, or your gut instinct, right? And that's literally your digestion, your guts, how is everything going in there? And there's the gut-brain connection. So a lot of people don't realize that they have head problems. But if you have gut problems, you have head problems. And so for me, that started to manifest where I was getting these like chronic sinus infections. And I actually went and got a consultation with a sinus surgeon because I was having these chronic sinus infections. And he was like, I don't even think this is going to help you. And I really had to get at the root of some deeper health issues, which were my diet and addressing my gut health, which then helped my sinuses and helped, heal that. And also, sometimes when we're quite sick, there's a lack of spiritual alignment, and that can manifest as illness as well. But the pineal gland, the third eye, the gut are two areas that we really use for our intuition. And if those physical mechanisms are not working properly, that's going to impact our ability to intuit for ourselves. So, I think you can't just be in a silo and like, I'm just going to focus on my spirituality, or I'm just going to focus on my health, separate from each other, because they are so interconnected. So that's why this kind of mind, body, spirit aspect is so important. And then you add that the heart, which is an area I've been learning and focusing on more. So when we're in stress, or when we don't feel good emotionally, and a lot of times we feel that in our heart, then the stress response goes up, and stress causes all sorts of problems, in illness and inflammation. So those three areas are really important for us to take care of, both physically as well as to tune in intuitively and pay attention. And when we take care of our physical health in those areas, we're more intuitively aligned. We can read things better for ourselves, and everything just unfolds better. So in my case, when I had my sort of physical health crisis, which came to a head during the recession, I was very spiritually out of alignment. So I was trying to force myself into this kind of political government path. It wasn't working. I was unemployed. I was in a relationship that wasn't aligned for me, so I wasn't listening there. And then on top of that, I was really learning like how to pay attention to what my body wants and needs. So in my case, I'm highly reactive to certain foods like grains and sugar, and what was I eating, all those things, because that's the sort of standard American diet.
That's what you're fed. That's what's available at the grocery store.
Yeah, and
that's advertised on TV.
I wasn't even eating an excessive amount of those things. Like I wasn't like a candy holic or anything. I would just, eat like a sandwich or something, or have a piece of chocolate. Like I wasn't like going overboard compared to the sort of the standard, but it was too much for my body, and I'm very sensitive. I now know that as a psychic. And an empath, I'm very sensitive to substances and energies, and foods have energy too. So for me, it was a real combination of learning about, what worked for my physical body, which was very different than what we are typically, given and consumed.
Offered.
Yes, exactly. And then also, what fed my spirit, what was aligned for me on a spiritual level as well. And so it's been a real journey. And that's why I started my podcast, which is called Healing Powers Podcast, where we address all of those things, because, I think health is really important. And then I think the spiritual aspect is really important. And the more synergy we have between those, I think the better our whole society will be. And we still have in our society, we have things so siloed. It's like, okay, spirituality, you go to your church or your priest or whoever, whatever spiritual practice you have, you go to the doctor for the physical stuff. And maybe you also have a counselor where you talk about emotions, without really understanding how interconnected all of those three things are.
I agree with everything that you've said. And I do a lot of work with people's guts. So I see that, gut brain connection. And when the gut's unhappy, as you said, the brain can't be happy. It's, the gut isn't making enough serotonin and dopamine for you to actually feel happiness and joy, et cetera, and vice versa, right? If you've got a headache, then you'll often feel that in your gut because you're not, that connection is so strong through the vagus nerve. And to your point about stress, 95% of all doctors' visits are related to stress.
Oh, it's almost everything. And stress can include emotional stressors. It can include relationship stressors. It can include physical stresses, from consuming things, or allergies. I mean, allergies, we have such a huge problem with undiagnosed allergies. And we have this sort of epidemic of mental health issues, depression, especially depression and anxiety. And, it's a very complex issue. I'm not trying to simplify it. But one of the big things is diet and relationships. Like, are you in a nurturing environment? Are you consuming foods that trigger a depressive or anxiety state in your body? Those are a couple of things that I think everyone could look at more closely.
I agree 100%. And look at that before trying the drugs, right? And sometimes people don't even realize, they just go to the doctor and they're given a drug, and they don't
Yeah.
realize that there's something else that they can be looking at first. And so I love your podcast and what you offer. And same here, is just that health education is really important for people too. And listening to your body, like you said, I often will say that we have to slow down enough to listen to our body and stop just accepting our symptoms as normal, because our symptoms are one way that our body is trying to talk to us and ask us to do something differently.
Absolutely. I love the quote. I think it's Socrates, let food be thy medicine. I mean, it
Yes.
really is that simple. We just have to learn, more, and not just kind of mindlessly consume things, just be more aware and more thoughtful and educated about what we're putting into our bodies. But absolutely, in fact, that's one of the first things that I teach people in terms of tapping into their intuition and psychic abilities is literally your body. Like, what is your body trying to tell you? And a lot of times people get frustrated with their body because they're like, they just feel like it's keeping them from doing whatever they,
Right.
want to do or whatever. And if you want to learn more about this, I love a book. It's called What Every Body Is Saying. And I can't remember the name of the author, but he's basically a consultant for like the FBI and law enforcement. And he's someone who comes in and gets hired when they have like a difficult to solve crime, and he reads body language and facial expression and analyzes it very clearly. And I read that book and it was really fascinating, because most of us are so shut off from our bodies, like literally, physiologically what's going on, but also even emotionally what's happening. And I read that book and had some real realizations about, sometimes I was, for example, having a negative reaction to a person I wasn't even consciously aware of. So for example, if you like someone, you will generally kind of face them, especially the bottom half of you, your legs, your feet. And if you don't, you will unconsciously face away. And what I realized after reading that book is that there may be someone where I was talking to them and then my feet were pointed, and the other, like opposite. And basically you're kind of biologically programmed to like be able to run away when
Right.
you face a threat or when you don't like something. So the more we can learn about those unconscious cues and really develop awareness about what we feel emotionally, what we feel physically in response to foods, environments, et cetera, that is literally the first step to tapping into your intuition. But most people are so cut off and they're living completely analytically, and they're also kind of drowning out their own thoughts and feelings with a constant stream of activity, information coming in. And as a psychic, that's one of the first things the angel showed me is we can't like hear and talk at the same time. And so when we can't hear more than one thing. So if we are hearing news, social media, whatever that is, we can't hear messages from our angels. We can't hear our own thoughts even. So it's really important to have that more quiet time and start to really being able to tune into ourselves.
I love that and totally agree how true it is. And so many people, I mean, we're just in that world now where it's do, go, right? And for many people, even when they're not on the go, they're still doing something because they don't want to feel bored, but it doesn't have to be boredom, right? So
Yeah.
I'd love for you to share, like, how could somebody who finds themselves with some downtime, instead of filling it with more social media or TV or games or whatever, how could they take that time to start to tap in to hearing messages from angels? What's a starting point for someone?
Sure. So I think any kind of meditative exercise, and it doesn't have to be just like sitting down in a silence or something. I know that's very difficult for a lot of people. I have a lot of guided meditations. I have a 30-day meditation program on my website, and then also an insight timer. I have a lot of free meditations. That's a great app if you've never checked it out. If you have a hard time literally being still, taking a walk, even just going for a quiet drive or taking a bath and reading a book, a shower, vacuuming, like it's different for every person, but something where you're not having to focus a lot consciously on something, but you still have time to receive intuitive insights is very helpful. I'm also a big fan of tapping. Have you done tapping? Are you
Yes,
familiar
I
with
have. I
tapping?
love tapping. Yeah.
I think that's a great way to calm specifically like anxiety.
Mhm.
I found that when I'm feeling like that kind of anxious, like I feel like I have to do something and I'm trying to kind of be more still or go more within, that tapping is really helpful for alleviating some of that kind of pressure.
And it
Um,
really does calm the
it
nervous
does.
system. You can drop into
Yes.
the parasympathetic nervous system. I'm actually working with a client right now, and we're working through Healing the Inner Child. It's a book called Unblocked by Margaret Lynch. I don't know if you know her work.
I do know her work. Yes. Yeah,
And
she's great.
so we're working through healing the inner child. And it's really powerful. And we can do that over Zoom. And I can see the difference at that point where she just drops out of that chronic state of stress from a lifetime of trauma, right?
And I think it's interesting when you look at some of the things that we're experiencing on a sort of macro level, or the collective level would be another way to look at it, that we have been in this hyper state of hyperactivity, overwork. And part of it is, I think, the structure we are just talking about, this sort of toxic masculine system that teaches us that in order to be more productive, we have to do, we have to push, we have to force, we have to like kind of break ourselves in a way. Um, and then it's also just this need for quiet, this need for going in, that, what happened? Oh, we got COVID. We got like, everyone had to slow down and kind of like go within. And I mean, like we got COVID as a society, whatever you feel like about COVID. I'm just saying that all of a sudden there was, for many people, a lot less activity, myself
Yeah, the
included.
world slowed down,
Yeah,
especially from like March, the first couple months, March to May of 2020. The world literally slowed down.
right. And sometimes a coping mechanism for not looking at our own trauma is actually overwork, kind of being busy. So I think that there's a lot of collective healing that's going on right now. And then on a very simple level, if we are not giving ourselves that downtime, that quiet time, that introspective time, our bodies will force it on us,
Mhm.
frequently through illness or injury. And I've experienced this many times. I had a job that was a pretty toxic job, and while I was working, they had these like stone steps that were polished, and I slipped on the stairs and fell on my back and injured myself. And I had to like go to work comp during work, and I was on limited, activity at work, and I just couldn't push myself the way that I had been doing for years and years. So that was an example of my body being like, nope, like we're just not going to allow this. And in our society, injury and illness are one of the ways that, people respect that in a way that they don't frequently if we say, I just need some time.
Right.
So I
It's
think
true.
if we can start to just honor the mental health aspect, what people need more, then everything will get much easier for everybody.
Yes, so true. And I was just thinking as you were saying that it's easier for people to accept and respect the physical injury when they see it. Like if
Yes.
you're on crutches or whatever, right? Obviously, you need to slow down and people understand that and give you that space. But when it's mental health, we don't see it. Both of my daughters had concussions. And, that was a time when they needed to slow down, etc. But other people don't see it, so don't understand. And so opening up that dialogue around mental health even more is going to help that process. It's starting to happen, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, I think it's shifting,
Mhm.
slowly. The more that individually each of us pays attention to what we need physically, what we need, you know, mentally, and the connection between the two, the better everything will go. I do think that there's been some positive changes in the world in regards to that, with COVID, even though I'm not, there are many things I didn't like about COVID, but it has caused people, I think, as a whole to respect, health more and the need for health. And if we feel sick, it's important not to push ourselves and expose everybody, et cetera, et cetera.
And stay home and rest, right?
And
Exactly.
rest, yeah. Your body is
Exactly.
telling you that you need rest. So listen.
Yeah. And how many times have we all before that, oh, it's just a cold or whatever, and push through and the cold gets worse instead of better. And you just end up with it for 3 weeks instead of you could have been over it in 5 days if you'd stopped those first couple of days and taken that rest, except we were too busy
Absolutely.
to take that rest. Right. So the
Yeah,
lesson here is all about listen to the body, slow down, give it what it needs, and you actually come out ahead way sooner.
absolutely. And again, it's this kind of pushing, forcing approach frequently has this backlash for us.
Yes.
Even if we might initially get some results, there's this con side, there's the losing side of that scenario as well. And I think when we navigate more intuitively and with more compassion, it's just easier all around. There's less of that kind of backlash element.
And you've probably heard this saying before, but I've said it many times here on this show, and I have clients that are, living proof of this. And I want to work with clients before this ever happens, but our body first talks to us gently in the gentle touch of a feather. And if we don't listen, it might come along and hit us with a brick. And if we still don't listen, watch out for the wrecking ball, right? And so
Yeah,
I love to work with people, even before they get to the brick, or at least at the brick stage, so we can bring the body back into balance without having to ever get to the wrecking ball. But we all know someone who's got to the wrecking ball. And it sounds like you were at the wrecking ball, and that's when that, turned your life around.
absolutely. And I want to say for anyone who's going through or has gone through that sort of wrecking ball phase where everything just seems to fall apart health wise, first of all, just have a lot of compassion for yourself. One of the reasons that this happens is that I believe our mainstream medical system doesn't really help us to fully heal or deeply understand some of these things. And so we're taught to go to the doctor when something's going wrong, and then we listen to that advice, but oftentimes it doesn't actually fully resolve whatever's going on inside of us. So in my case, when I was in high school, I started to, fall asleep in class, which was unusual for me. If I was asleep, I just wouldn't wake up. And I finally did go to the doctor and was diagnosed with hypoglycemia, which was valid. I had hypoglycemia. I was diagnosed with that when I was, I think, a senior in high school. And so I understood that I had these blood sugar, rises and crashes. They did tell me not to consume like straight sugar, which is fair, like, pure sugar soda or candy or whatnot. But really wasn't any other discussion outside of that. And so I followed the guidance I was told, and then fast forward many years, and the truth is I needed more than just like not eating straight processed sugar.
Right. You needed more
I
guidance.
I needed, yeah, and I needed to not even eat things that converted to sugar,
Right.
and I just needed to have a deeper awareness. So I just want to share that compassion. Like, look, if you've gone through that, it's likely that you may have been doing even what the doctor told you, and you still ended up there. And so that's part of this disillusionment that happens, and it can feel like you're kind of a victim of like, I thought I was doing all the right things, and that's how I felt at the time. And then I learned, well, I have to take more responsibility and be my own advocate and learn for myself and seek, practitioners outside of that system. I'm not saying not to go to doctors, still have doctors, but, it wasn't until I started to consult with what would be probably labeled alternative practitioners, nutritionists and naturopaths and energy healers and all that I started to get to the true root of my healing. So if you are going through that, getting hit with a 2x4 health wise, just, it's okay. You can get through it. You can heal quickly, and just have compassion for yourself and for others that are going through this, because everyone's on their own health journey. We don't really know what's going on, and it's important that we not judge ourselves or others for whatever health journey they're going through.
So well said. And I'm just going to add one thing to that, which I think is really important. You've said that to take responsibility for your own health, which I fully agree with, because we can be empowered in our health journey when we do that, and getting second opinions and asking questions and looking for the root cause and continuing to look for that. That's where we get to that place of true healing. Because until we find that root cause, we're still just masking, right? And that can lead to another symptom coming up because the body's going, nope, that's not what I wanted. And so I'm going to give you, the next step to make you, keep looking and keep learning. And it is really important to take responsibility for our own health, because we can't all put the responsibility on the doctors to fix us. That's a heck of a lot of responsibility to put on the doctor. And yet it is what many of us have been taught.
It is what we've been taught, and I think we need to retrain ourselves and shift that system. Thankfully, I think more doctors are opening up to different, forms of healing and approaches, and I'm very grateful for that. I encourage people to connect with forms of healing that work for them, and also that different forms work for different people. I think in life, it's really important that we not blame ourselves, but take responsibility and understand that we got to where we are through a series of circumstances and choices. And on the one hand, that can feel very difficult. So in my situation, when I was through my big sort of life portal, life change, it was hard to acknowledge my piece in this toxic marriage, or, being cheated on and lied to and all these things. Like, it was really difficult. But the truth is, if you can take ownership of that, not in a blaming way, but just in an acceptance, then you can change things. Whereas if you're in victim mode and everything is outside of yourself, that's a very weak position to be in terms of making change for the future. So it's not just for the moment, but it's also for the future, so that you can be better positioned to move forward and be more empowered.
I love it. And something that I always teach and go to is that everything happens for us, not to us. And as you said, in that moment, it's hard to see it. But when we can still come to that place of, this is happening for me, what am I supposed to learn from it? Or what's on the other side? So you can keep putting one foot in front of the other. And look at where you're at today. I mean, how amazing is that? Because clearly this happened for you to get you onto this journey, which was a huge, shift from where you were at.
Absolutely. And whatever difficult scenarios there were for me with the end of my marriage, I will always be grateful for the huge realignment that came from that, and the desire to tap into my abilities. One of the major motivations for me to get psychic training was I never wanted to go through that kind of hurt again in a relationship. I wanted to sort of see a person more clearly, kind of psychically, instead of just seeing whatever they were presenting to me. And so I will always appreciate that. Like, that, wasn't what I thought I was getting when I went into that relationship, but that was the gift that I received. And after I could get some distance from it, I was very grateful for that.
And that's the beautiful thing, when at the end of it, you can look back with gratitude for whatever happened. That's when we know we've landed in the new place where we're supposed to be.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I've thoroughly loved chatting with you through this whole dialogue here. I'm just wondering if you can share fairly briefly on tapping into your intuition to magnetize success, because I'm sure every listener out there would love to be able to magnetize their success. Is that something that you can share briefly, and then maybe people can come back and work with you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, I think we already briefly talked about one key piece of this, which is just really sitting with things in our body, making certain choices. Does it feel good? Does it feel exciting? Does it feel suffocating? Does it feel heavy? Just really sitting with how something feels in your body is a wonderful first step. And then, just like anything, it's learning the different ways that you receive information. So there's ways that people receive information through psychic abilities in different areas. So you can be clairvoyant, which means you see things. You have, visions you see in the physical reality or in your mind's eye, your imagination. Some might call it your imagination. Maybe you hear, you receive information through, literally like hearing in your ears. Maybe you are empathic, you feel in your body. Maybe you have information through touch, like you pick something up and you get information from touching something. So it's first important to understand, how are you programmed, the different types of abilities that are out there, and then how you operate specifically, because everybody is different. People tend to think about the sort of clairvoyant aspect, which is seeing, as that's what psychic is. But the truth is, there's lots of different. There are people that receive information through taste and smell, precognitive visits. There's so many different things. So it's important to understand the gamut of how it can manifest, and then get some training for yourself to see specifically how it works for you.
I love that. And I just want to ask, is there also just unknowing?
Yes, yes. There's so many different abilities. So claircognizance, which is when you just know something. Claircognizance, as well as being an empath, I think are two of the hardest ones, because if someone asks you why, you can't really explain it. Like, you know, something just doesn't feel good, or you just know on a deep level something is, yeah, it's a yes or it's a no, etc. And that's about developing that inner trust, and just acknowledging that just because you can't explain something to someone else doesn't make it less true. But essentially, there's all kinds of things that over the period of human history we didn't know were true based on proof that people could feel. And I believe that many psychic abilities at some point will be demonstrated scientifically, and there already are some, scientific demonstrations of some of these things. But I think it will be shown on a massive level. Dark matter, and just how our thoughts, feelings, and beliefs really impact the physical world. If you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend checking out the work of this Japanese scientist. It's titled Messages in the Water. Have you looked into that?
I haven't.
Oh, it's fascinating. So this Japanese scientist started to look at water molecules. And so he wrote several books, and you can find, like, there's a Wikipedia entry on this. The books are titled Messages in the Water. What he started to do was look at water molecules, and what he found was really fascinating, that water molecules changed a lot depending on their environment. And then he started to do these experiments. So, you find like a water from a pond, the water molecule is very different from, like, water molecule in another environment, for example. And so he started to have people meditate with water. And then he would take photos of the water molecules. So the water molecules, when people meditated on the word love, were these beautiful, like, intricate, crystalline forms. And the water molecules where people meditated and sent the message of hate were these misshapen, ugly, they didn't have structure. And so our thoughts literally impact matter. And guess what? We're mostly water, right? So we have this incredible impact on our own body's physiology through our own thoughts and intentions. And then I believe, as a psychic, that our thoughts and intentions go out there in the world, and they create either these beautiful kind of crystalline magical structures in our life and in our world and in the water, or these kind of ugly, misshapen, things that don't really work very well for us. So it's up to us to consciously be in awareness of that. What kind of thoughts and energy are we putting out? And also, just especially if we're having health issues, like, what kind of energy am I in right now? What are my thoughts? But I've heard of, the message in the water is one experiment. Another experiment is this rice experiment, where you put rice with water, like cooked, and you put it in a container, and you have one that you focus on the love, and and the same thing, like, one will be like white and pure and pristine, and the other one, where people focus on the negative thoughts and feelings, will develop, like, mold and grow black and gross. So there's so many examples of this in our lives. Or, another one that's frequently done is the plants, where you have one tree that you give it positive, loving messages, another one where you yell at it or whatever. And I think that's not very nice to the plant, but it's a real thing,
Yes.
So it's really important for us to have awareness of that, for ourselves, for the world, and just know that our thoughts and feelings have a huge impact on the life that we are living and the world as a whole.
Well, I love all of that, and it's so true. And just to end there is beautiful. So I do want to ask you, as I ask all of my guests, what does "don't wait for your wake-up call" mean to you?
Oh, I think it's what we talked about, whether it's health or maybe just life purpose or life circumstances, but don't wait until everything gets really horrible to go after what you want. So I think on a deeper level, when I had my sort of realignment, where I had my health issues and I became unemployed and everything, I was going after things that I didn't truly want on a deep level. And when I could really get at what I wanted an easier life, for example. I was in this paradigm of working, 40 to 80 hours a week. And now, guys, I work about 2 hours a day. And, that's awesome. I still do things that, might be considered productive in other times, but it's also like we're not here to work all the time, so just to really think in your heart, like, what do you want for your life? What lifestyle do you want? What did you want when you were a little kid? Because so often when we were children, we had a deep knowing of what we wanted, and we just have to get realigned with that. So when I was little, I said I wanted to be an actress, a model, and a writer and a singer, and I do all those things now, in my own way. But we have that deep knowing, and it's just that it gets taught out of us. So just don't wait for things to get to this crisis point. If you are at that crisis point, it's okay. You can turn it around very quickly. But if you're feeling an inner kind of nudge or calling, there's a reason for that. The faster you listen, the easier everything will turn out.
Very, very true. And so true about what you were saying about kids and it getting taught out of us, because I think kids are so pure. And going back to an earlier part of our conversation about teaching this in schools, that would be so powerful, because kids, like yourself, you had these visions of ghosts and you were thinking you were crazy. And yet, if this had been taught in school, you would have known much sooner, no, I'm not crazy. And, this is a skill that I have that I can hone, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And
Working with,
and sorry, go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, well, working with kids is really powerful. And I don't know about you, but how much angst was there in wondering if you were crazy? Because I know another woman who's similar story to you. And like, there was a lot of almost mental health issues that arose because of her not being able to be in alignment with who she truly was, because she was too scared of it and too scared to share with others, right? How many kids are out there like that today?
Oh, so many. I mean, there's a huge issue with kind of persecution fears and not feeling like we can speak our truth. And the other thing that's coming up is boundaries, because a huge part of my lesson and journey with all this sort of paranormal, supernatural stuff was learning to enforce boundaries and saying, like, that doesn't mean I have to have it in my house or in my space or in my energy field. And especially as women, this is a part of this, we are really not taught to have healthy boundaries. And it starts as children. I think even as kids, little girls, we're taught that we're there to be looked at and to look pretty, and that, people can touch us or hug us if we don't want, et cetera, et cetera. So this comes really into learning about boundaries, honoring our boundaries, as well as understanding how all of that connects with the non-physical realm.
Very, very true. As I think about my own boundaries, and even, I'm in my mid 50s, like working on them to this day, right? Because it isn't taught in, I see so many changes that could be coming to our education system beyond just the sciences and the math and the English that would set people up for far deeper and more successful lives, but successful in a different way, right? Not success isn't that hard work, which is what I was taught, right?
Yeah, or the path to success is through hard work, like meaning it
Right.
has to be hard, like it has to be this difficult, strenuous activity. And success can be easy, success can be fun. I think the hard part is honestly releasing all those old stories about how things
Yes.
have to be.
Exactly. And just allowing yourself to be in alignment, allowing yourself to surrender, etc.
Yes.
So if people, I've loved having this conversation with you. We could probably talk for another hour, but if people want to connect with you, work with you, how can they reach you? And I know you've offered a very generous gift to the audience as well. So please share about that.
Yeah, so people can connect with me through my website, healingpowers.net. I'm also on Instagram at LauraPowers44. And I believe it was a grounding and clearing meditation
Yes.
that we're giving out. And you have the special link for that, which will be in the show notes. But yeah, I'd love for people to connect with me. If you want to reach out to me, bookings at LauraPowers.net. And I offer, various classes and programs. And I also have many books. So that's another powerful and easy way to connect. If you want to learn more about psychic abilities and how they operate, my book, Diary of a Psychic, has specific details on that.
I saw that one. You've also got angels and manifesting, and then angels, how to understand, recognize, and receive their guidance. as well as archangels and ascended masters. So that's just a few of them. You've been very, very busy with all of your book writing. So I love it. I'm going to have to dive into some of them myself. So just as we wrap here, do you have any final message you'd like to leave the audience in inspiring them to step into their own healing and intuitive journey today?
Yeah, your life can be so much better than you think. And it's really about releasing that programming, stepping into it, and then in many cases, releasing, those and circumstances, people, situations that aren't aligned with whatever that vision for your life that you want. So you can have it. There's no external source out there being like, you're deserving and you're not, or whatever. It's like, it's really up to us, and our belief and our energy. And it can shift in a heartbeat. That's just it. It can change so fast. And I remember when I was literally in the most devastated place I've ever been in my life, which was, unemployed, physically ill, going through a terrible divorce during the recession. It's just like, I felt like my world had fallen apart. And things shifted so quickly and dramatically that it was almost hard to believe. And it is possible. So wherever you are, whatever it is that you want to create, I want everyone to know that it's possible. And if there are people telling you it's not, maybe consider getting new friends, a new circle, surround yourself with positive, loving, and inspiring people, and just watch the magic unfold.
I love that. Beautiful ending. Thank you so, so much for joining me here today, Laura. This has been fabulous. And I know you've inspired all the listeners out there and the ripple effect that these podcasts have from being out there forever. And thank you to the audience for tuning in and learning from Laura. And I appreciate you tuning in, being part of my audience, and I look forward to having you join me again next week. Thanks so much. If you're enjoying my content and someone that wants to step into being proactive in your health and learning more, I would love to invite you to join my membership community. There's a link in the show notes. For only $19.99 a month, you get access to all of my content, and there's a lot, as well as weekly calls that you can come and get your health questions answered. It's truly priceless. I'd love to see you join the community. Check out the link in the show notes.